Thank you. So I know everybody likes a birthday, and today is someone's birthday. It's Google's birthday, literally today, the 27th of September, and Google turned 20 today. So I tell my colleagues, you know, those teenage years, they're over. You know, you're now an adult. Time to step up and take responsibility. You just can't blame it on having fun anymore. I spent most of my years, not quite 20, but I spent quite a few years at Google, and I'm proud of some of the things we built. I mean, look at the scale of this. This is what happened between 0 to 20. There are now 7 different products that hopefully some of you in the room use from time to time that each have over 1 billion users. So that gives you some sense of the scale of what we're talking about. And of course, that also gives you some sense of the scale of the responsibilities that we have with regards to compliance with the GDPR. So I'll interrupt just very briefly to make a little announcement that's relevant to the GDPR and that's relevant to Berlin. The CSA, you see up there, the Cloud Security Alliance is forming a Center of Excellence to be based with new physical headquarters here in Berlin, dedicated to helping companies figure out how to comply with the GDPR. Why is Google saying that? We're a founding member. And I think that will benefit the entire enterprise sector as we try to figure out what codes of conduct should look like in this space and continue to improve our compliance posture with regards to the GDPR. I gave some statistics when I was in Berlin for the launch of the GDPR in May, and I want to reprise those for this room. I want to reprise them because they're numbers, they're hard numbers. It's what Google as one large company invested in our GDPR prep readiness work. This is what it took us to try to get ready for it. Even when I look at this, I still gulp at times. 500 human years of readiness work. Over 1,000 different products that had to go through a GDPR compliance review. 40 human years just for those product assessments alone. In terms of updating our contracts, for example, with the advertising ecosystem, it was over 12.5 million contracts that had to be updated with the appropriate clauses for data responsibilities between us and processors, depending on the role that each of us were playing in any particular context. And the one that blows my mind, 110 billion plus data stores mapped. Now, when I started at Google, remember, this is the 20th birthday, I still remember a little company that had basically one product. When I was hired, I was going to be kind of the lawyer, the privacy person, and fix the copy machine. And I did all of those things, and look what it's become. So it's an astounding reminder of how fast this world now moves. Even if you're not interested in the Google history, and there's no reason you would need to be, it is a reminder of how fast things can grow to scale in the internet sector and how important our responsibilities in this space are. Obviously, we had to launch a new privacy policy that talked, among other things, about international data transfers. We launched tools for people to take control of their own data. And I'll remind people of the statistics here again, that we're on track to getting about 2 billion interactions with the tools for people to take control of their own data in the course of the year. Again, those are startling numbers, I think, by anybody's estimation, and over half of them in mobile. And so those of you who know you're trying to build user interfaces and give people tools, you know you have to build them differently in the mobile context, just given screen limitations and other things. But it's important because over half of our people are using it in that way. The data transfer project is something that we've come together with a group of other companies to help try to make this idea of data portability a reality for people so that people can have common formats to download and move their data if they choose from one service to another. And meanwhile, we're also doing what we can for international transfers for our cloud business as well. Now, just a word on international data transfers, because that is, of course, the topic of the panel that we're speaking, and I'm supposed to give the impulse, whatever that means in English. I think it's a mess. I think the whole field has always been a mess. I mean, we're in legal limbo at best. We have a privacy shield that replaced the safe harbor that was annulled, which itself will be open to challenge yet again. We have MCCs, which are another instrument for international data transfers, which themselves are in front of the same European Court of Justice that struck down the safe harbor agreement. We have other instruments like adequacy, which are at best a small patchwork solving the problem. As I think everybody in the room knows, adequacy as a concept of European law has been in place since the directive, and yet only roughly about, 12 countries in the world, a dozen countries, maybe 13, 14 countries in the world have been awarded the label of adequacy. All that means that for large companies is that there is a legal limbo. The instruments are partial, they're incomplete. The instruments that exist are under legal challenge in front of the top court in Europe. That's not a comfortable place for anyone to be. But what is the reality? Well, the reality is, since at least the internet, data has been zipping around the planet, largely in a sense that does not even understand what a natural geographic political border is even meant to be. I mean, I would even submit that you could not tell me physically where your data exists within your organizations. To the extent that data has become digital, it's not a physical thing anymore. Data isn't that thing on a piece of paper, that piece of paper that you can put in a file cabinet here in Berlin, or that you can take with you and move to New York. That's just not the model anymore. What it is it's an immaterial digital record of data stored, if you will, within a physical infrastructure of data centers and other things, but which in the reality are always in more than one location. It's got to be in more than one location. You couldn't allow the data of a bank to be lost, for example, because the power in their Frankfurt data center went out one day, right? That would be completely unacceptable. So it's in many different places. At Google, we run a network of data centers around the planet. They are used for maximum efficiency, not necessarily with regards to location. Data is stored in multiple locations. Even something as simple as Gmail, and I hope some people in the room use Gmail. Even in Gmail, your own Gmail inbox elements may be stored in multiple different data centers. They may move around. They travel around the globe. I could not tell you, even if I were forced to, where that data exists. And yet, the entire world of international data transfers is kind of based on this fiction, if you will, that data has this one location, which is then moved from that one place to another place, and that other place will be acceptable if it meets certain data protection standards. Now, I think that whole field is wrong. I'm going to be a little provocative. I think the model that should be followed is the Canadian model, which is very wise to me. It says if you're a controller and you're collecting data, it's your responsibility to continue to respect the privacy standards, regardless of the location of the data. As a Canadian company, you're going to be subject to the legal obligations of the Canadian privacy law PIPEDA. If you store that data in a data center in Canada, fine. If you choose to store it on a data center instead in Mexico, your legal standards and responsibilities do not change. It's not as though the location, if you even knew what the location was of the data, is the thing that should dictate which laws and which standards apply. That makes absolutely no sense. So this is a model that's been with us since at least the 80s. Some people like the retro sound of international data transfer instruments. I guess we've all become kind of familiar, but to me, it's like ABBA. It's kind of cute, sweet, but what the hell are we still doing listening to it? So anyway, that was perhaps a bit provocative for my introductory talks, and looking forward to the panel. Thank you.